see. Hi, welcome to our first call of the year. I hope everybody is excited about talking about tension. And does anybody, before we start though, does anybody have anything that they'd like to share right off the bat, or a question that they'd like to ask, or an experience that had a big impact them? We haven't seen each other in a couple of weeks, and there was a Christmas, and so things are likely to have happened. Does anybody have anything they want to share or ask? Okay. Jennifer's got her house put together and she's got a new carpet. Yay! All right. When last we left, on the 18th, we were wrapping up, or we had started talking about tension, and everybody, I think, had this. I heard some yummy noises there on the recording about tension. And so, if you don't mind, I'd like to talk about that today. And so to kick off, can I ask the question, how do we feel about tension and our kids? And specifically, this is a question I'm wondering about, is living with tension a good thing for our kids or a bad thing? Anybody have any thoughts on that? Oh, hi, Tom. Welcome.
Hi.
I can give you my thoughts. I think it's all age dependent, but I think the most important part is learning to live with tension, because it's going to be a normal part of life. So how do we introduce them to it in a way that encourages them to dance with it as opposed to fight it? And how do we encourage them to grow into that? You know, because tension at 5 is obviously very different than tension at 15.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I do think, so first, to answer your question, is it a bad thing for our kids? I don't think so. I think it's harder for us as parents. Well, I'll speak for myself. I think it's harder for me as a parent to give my children an instruction and then wait and let them figure out when to do it and how to do it. And but even with the ages, I have the 2-year-old, and I will say, go put your diaper in the trash. And then I have to sit there in silence while she decides whether or not she's going to do it. And mostly I just want to pick her up and put the diaper in her hands and take her to the trash. But even at 2, it's really, I think that tension really helps support decision-making. I think it helps support just the muscle of choosing. And so I think tension is a great thing if we can handle it.
And I guess this is where my question comes in. The purpose of tension, I think, is because it is a tool for resolving tension, for impelling action, right? So if we create tension, it's an opportunity for people to take action around us. But is there a point at which the tension, I guess the question is living with tension a skill, or is being able to resolve tension a skill for our kids? Does that make any sense? Brett, you said talking about dancing with tension, I think it was.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It's interesting. This is obviously a key part of the Alt MBA for anybody who's done that, the dancing with tension. I think there's a motive behind tension a lot of times. And for example, the diaper issue. I know, having listened to Jennifer, I think we understand her motives. It's to train her kids, to get them to learn self-reliance, to take responsibility. But there can also be that motive of, I don't want to say dominating is not the right word, but controlling. Like, I'm the parent, I'm in control, here's what you're going to do. And I find myself doing that. Some of my background lends to that, and I have to be careful with that. I think that motive behind the tension, what's it there for? And then that can lead to the next step, which is it good or bad tension? In which I think there can be both. And so I don't know that I'm answering your question. I might be rambling, but with kids, as long as they understand there's a reason behind it or see the value of it, whether it's the first or 500th time they've had to do it, I think there's value in it. And I think it's important. I'm going to pause because I don't know if I answered your question.
I'm not sure I know what the question is. I think about how as adults, we can get accustomed to tension. And some of us have learned to live with tension for a really long time. Like, we can be in a situation and say, you know what, this could be better, but then we don't do anything about it for months. And I'm just, as I think about that from my adult lens, I'm like, do we want our kids to learn to live with tension for a long time? Or do we want to help them see, I think I'm answering my question right now. Help them see this is tension, this is an opportunity to take action. The decision making that Jennifer mentioned.
Well, the difference between being able to solve the problem or live with the problem, and having the tension of a problem and realizing, you know what, I can't solve this right now, I need to live with it, or I need to find a different way other than what my parents or my guardians or my teachers are trying to say. And I think that allows them to problem solve. And the more we problem solve for them, the more they're going to rely on us and not them. And that's something that is, as a parent, is very tough to do because we want the best for them, but at the same point, we need them to, do it for themselves, whether it be put a diaper in the garbage or fold your clothes. I've told you for how many times, but it's up to them to want to do it, and the tension's got to be great enough for them to handle it or not. So I follow Gary Vaynerchuk. He had a post, and I'll read it. To build your kids up to a point where they know when not to listen to you. And I thought that was, a good post, and he's got some good things about parenting, where, they don't need to listen to us anymore. They know what to do, or let them do it their way. So that's my 2 cents in 2020.
I agree with Brett when he mentioned the idea of is tension good or bad, since this was the key thing I learned in Alt MBA. If we are deciding to raise attention, then it should be in order to having on mind result which is beneficial for both sides, for us as a parent, and on the first place for our kids. All other kinds of tension, I wouldn't agree are good, but those we are creating in order, of course, our kids to benefit from learning something, as it is taking diaper to the garbage. It's something what we should do and what is a positive, I believe.
So do we all agree that tension is an appropriate and useful tool for raising kids? Nod yes if you think, and no if you don't. Okay. Okay, good. Wow, we're all okay. So we're all on the same page. I'm not actually that surprised because it's in all Seth's stuff. How has anybody used tension, either good or in a good or a bad way, effectively or not, in their child raising?
I use money as tension.
Go ahead.
Sense of when they were young, we handed them allowance and said, if you want to buy stuff, go buy it. Not my problem. So if you want toys or certain things that were outside of what we normally would buy, you're free to go do what you want. And you'd be amazed at how quickly kids can figure out that tension. Same went for college. Like, you're smart enough to go to college, figure out how to get scholarships and things.
Yeah, it's pretty much my son. I encouraged him to go to college if he chose to do so. But if he was going to do so, he was going to do so on his dime. So when he did decide to go to college, he was serious about it. He buckled down to do it, and he ended up with a couple of degrees. And of course, it's, having had to pay on his own dime, he had to figure it out himself how to do that. So, it was part of the deal.
So, John, how was that? How do you see tension manifest in what you did there?
I think it was a lot of peer pressure that he saw around him that perhaps built the tension because the parents around him were all paying the bill for the college, and he was pretty astounded when I said it. And now he's very thankful that he had to, use his own dime to acquire the degrees he got. And of course, now he's using his degrees exactly for the profession he's gone into. So I think the tension of the pressure, the peer pressure around him that he was seeing, and then, having to make the decision himself is, is this what you want? And waiting until he was sure to pursue the degrees he wanted, I think also built some tension in him too, because he didn't just jump into college. He waited.
Okay. So you're saying that you allowed the tension of peer pressure to help you make, and then
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. Kind of an odd way of looking at it, perhaps, but there was a lot of peer pressure with all his friends and stuff. Their parents were just, whatever you want. And it's really interesting that later on, some of their sons and daughters that went to school ended up not going into those things that they majored in, or even dropping out.
Mm-hmm.
And when he went, he was completely 100% saturated, and he did it himself.
That is interesting. I think we tend to think of peer pressure as being a bad thing, but
Yeah.
we can use that as a tool to ramp up the tension.
Yeah.
Any other examples people want to share?
Before that,
Oh,
yeah.
go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, Brett. Husband.
Maria, go ahead. I'll call on you.
Okay. Yeah. So I just would like to ask John to share how he felt this tension he created. It must be very difficult for a parent. At least, it sounds to me so.
Especially as a single parent. It's pretty brutal. They talk about, Seth talks about it too, that, if you're gonna be a ruckus maker, and if you're gonna be a linchpin or whatever, and I don't consider myself to be a very good one at either way, you can expect not everybody to go along with what you say. And of course, the parents thought that was terrible. Your son deserves this and deserves that. And, I figured that was part of the deal. He wasn't quite ready to go through at that time. And when he did go through, like I say, he was 100% ready. And it was 100% dedication, 60 miles an hour, nonstop, boom, 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 just straight A's across the board, just boom. Bachelor's, boom. Master's, boom, go right into his profession that he wanted. So and he's doing it, and he's very, very successful right now. So
That's great to hear. Thanks a lot, John. Yeah.
welcome.
Thanks.
I love this. I'm not anywhere close to college, but I'm probably closer than I think I am with 9-year-olds. We're definitely saving for it. But I love the concept because it aligns with what I've been trying to teach the kids, not wholly successfully, is the tension between freedom and responsibility, which is what every person on earth should be focusing on, right? And so with my kids, we've started on the responsibility side. And they said, why are you always telling me? I said, why are you telling me to do this? I said, well, you have not demonstrated to me that you can do this on your own as a responsible person, as a responsible child. Once you do, I'll leave you alone, and then you can do what you want. So when you do the things that we need done, or you pitch in as a team, then that freedom follows. You can't take the freedom without the responsibility. And it's coming. I mean, it's slow, but I love the idea. I found a way to go to college where my parents did not pay anything, and that was my choice. And I think they were prepared to do it. I ended up not doing it, but the sense of freedom I had from any responsibility, for any, I wasn't beholden to anybody at that point. And it felt really good to have that freedom to be who I wanted to be. So I would wish that for my children.
I had a similar experience. My father told me if I wanted to go to school, it was on my dime. And you know what, that freedom of, okay, I'm making this decision. And I remember other kids, they had the free ride and I didn't. I had student loans, and it motivated me to make sure I made good use of that money because it was my money. And, you know, it definitely motivated me. So, you know, how do we do that to our kids? You know, and we're saving too, and similar in ages, but you know, when it does come time, what does that money go to? You know, for paying the education, or, you know, paying them to, you know, buy a car and go out to the workforce. But I think, you know, enabling them too much with too much money. And that's, I think, like what Rocky said, money motivates little kids, big kids, adults. So, you know, the sense of that money, to what it gives you, will, you know, create tension or help relieve tension if you know, have enough of it, I guess.
Yeah, that's interesting. The idea that if money can solve your problem, you don't have a problem, works the other way too. So if the kids have money, they get to resolve their tension. Maybe it's a shortcut for them. That's interesting. So kids and tension, kids are bad at tension because they haven't got fully developed executive function. But we start off with tension, like from the time they're babies. We play hide and seek, we play peekaboo with them, which is like tension. How have you seen it change as your kids have gotten older, their ability to deal with tension? And for those who have older kids, was there something that turned the corner in the way they handled tension, or the way you were able to use tension for them?
Well, I think of tension with fear, and kids being, when they're younger, fearless. So on a playground, they'll do whatever they want, and when they start getting older, you let them roam free, and then but they'll look back for encouragement. My kids are 6 and 9, 2 girls, and it's I definitely can kind of see that tension and fear changing, but also responsibility. Recently, what we did was. Like they got a Lego for Christmas, and I'm like, if you want to do the Lego, we got to clean up the living room. It was a huge mess. So, use that, the same responsibility there. And the oldest, she wanted to do it. The youngest, she refused. So she just went away and didn't do it. So you can see the difference in the age there. And I don't think it was that she really didn't want to do it. Maybe she just didn't want to do the responsibility part.
I run into some of that, Tom, with I have twin 9-year-olds, and sometimes I think when that tension hits, they might want to do something, and this is what I've run into, but sometimes I think they're getting old enough to say, that's what he wants me to do. So I'm going to express my freedom here by not doing it. And oh my God, that's where my attachment comes. You know, I'm so attached to that outcome. I have to back off and say, okay. But then I so badly, using my parents' old school parenting style, I so badly want to come up with a consequence for her. When I think the natural consequence for her is if she does that a couple times and starts to feel left out, her need for belonging may perk up, you know? And it may be a twin thing. If she watches her sister do it, she may want to do something different, but she may also want to do what she's doing while also having her freedom. And for me, I go back and forth on that, and I feel like a boat in the middle of the ocean. You know, I'm like, I can't, without oars, you know, I don't know which direction to go. It's so confusing.
You know, it sounds, Brett, like maybe that's an okay thing because it's tension either way. Maybe this is how our kids survive our parenting in the first place, because there's going to be tension on either side, and no matter where they go, there's going to be a tension to push them back into a good direction. Catherine, go ahead.
Maybe they're better at handling the tension than I am.
Catherine, go ahead. You had something you wanted to say.
I was only thinking about Brett's dilemma there. I was thinking that when there's so many different things to emphasize or so many different directions to go, you know, I think as a parent, this is just getting really meta though, that we have to decide which thing of all of the important things, which thing do we want to emphasize at the moment? Which thing, you know, rears its head and needs tension at the moment for them to learn the thing, you know, and that's just a constant juggle, you know. That's it. Nothing earth-shattering.
That perspective is hard to come by for me, at least. But I hear what you're saying. It's how can you distill it down to the next best thing or the thing that matters?
Yeah, I also believe it's very important what Catherine said, because we cannot teach them everything in the same time. We really have to decide what is the most important. I don't know, basic safety when they are 2 years old, not to put the fingers in electricity supply, or to teach them not to take anything from the stranger when they are going back home alone from school, or this kind of things we should first establish properly and use tension for it, and then we could go on these, let's say, a little bit less important issues. Thanks for reminding us on this, Catherine.
I love where you're going with that. Something I started doing a while back was going back to the beginning of my photos history with my kids and kind of reeling through the years again. And the best thing that did for me, I did it accidentally the first time. After that, I was intentional. It gave me perspective on how far they've come. And it gave me hope not to give up when I start to struggle with something I'm trying to work on them with. Because I say, look, when they were 2 or 1, you put covers on the outlets, you tried to keep them from killing themselves. Look where we are now. Now I just want them to have their socks on by 7:10 so they don't miss the bus. In 3 years, it's going to be something else. And it reminds me to step back and give them space and to let them progress. It's so hard when you see them day to day.
I also noticed at that early age, I don't know, let's say before 10 or 12 years old, when my daughter was, it's very hard to measure how much tension is too much, how much tension will keep them back, that they don't try to do something. For example, I was explaining that when she's going, I don't know, 500 meters alone from the beach to the house. She shouldn't talk with anyone she does not know or whatever. And then I was thinking, how much is too much of this kind of fear, because she will hesitate to go that distance alone. So really this measure is tricky in everything, of course, but in that early age especially.
I have a quick story to illustrate some of that. For a few years, my son and his son lived with me, and I noticed that my grandson was completely ready to ride his bike without the training wheels. That was last summer. The summer before last. This past summer, 6 months ago, my son moved to his own place. His son was obviously still ready to ride his bike without his training wheels. My son is very fearful, so I didn't mention it to my son that I knew that his son was ready, because I knew that he wouldn't believe me. And so he did tell me eventually that he was thinking about buying him elbow pads and knee pads, and he was gearing himself up to get ready to give his kid this freedom. And then he looked out the window and saw his kid riding by on a neighbor's bike without training wheels. And so, my takeaway from that, and from watching my kids and my grandkids grow, is that the kids are almost always way ahead of where we think they are in physical capabilities and mental and emotional capabilities. Somebody, I think it was Brett, was just saying it was just so hard to keep up with them. I wonder if it would be to their advantage to always assume that they are way ahead of where we think they are, and to ask ourselves maybe what we need to look for to know where they really are. Meeting the kids where they are is one of my mantras, because we're just so bad at that. That's all. I'll unmute myself now.
That perspective is something I ran across the other day. I think it was a family gathering, and the parents were all kind of like, "Hey kids, be quiet. You guys are so loud. What's going on?" And I said, if I put myself in the kid's shoes, first of all, you're 3 feet tall. Everybody else is up here. So of course you're yelling, right? That's your perspective. These people can't hear me if I don't speak up. And then I got further down that road of, oh my God, every day, what is their life like? Looking up, seeing these adults scrambling around, doing things. And you're right. It is so hard to step back into those shoes.
Talking about bicycles, I used to do a lot of cycling, like 150 to 200 miles a week. So I wanted to get the kids, on doing that. And I got them a balance bike that was a trike, so they could do it when you walk. So everyone all the people seeing them out would be like, wow, that's so cool, that the little kid riding the bike. So, but then my oldest daughter, someone gave her a bike with training wheels. So I'm like, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to make it easy for him and go from the 3 wheels to the 2-wheel balance bike with no pedals. So now, the older one learned it with the training wheels. But then I had her do, I taught her, with just a regular bike she got for last 2 years of Christmas at 7. So what I realized when I was trying to help her learn, I'm like, oh, the physics, when you go faster, it's balanced more, and I had forgotten that really, even after all those thousands of miles that I've done, but just allowing her to go faster made it safer for her, When you go too slow, that's when you fall over. It was weird for me to figure that out, but because you have that fear of going faster, like me and her, I'm sure. But then my youngest, she learned, and they both learned like in a day pretty much, which I was like kind of shocked. But the youngest one, she, it's just different paths, but the same result, because she didn't have the training wheels. She only had the balance bike, the trike to the balance bike to the wheels with the pedals. So, different paths, and, I can feel like, oh, there's that fear of not going fast, but that's what you need to do.
I have 2 things to say about that. I bought a Strider bike for my grandkids, and my kids wouldn't let the grandkids use it because it wasn't fancy enough. They wanted the regular kind of bike with the training wheels. And so that was very disappointing to me. And so I dropped it off on the lawn of a house where I knew there were a lot of kids living and they were all very poor, and I dropped it off on their lawn, and I've seen it moved in different places. So I know those kids are using it. And the other thing that I wanted to say was, you know, Tom, you mentioned that a relative gave your kid a bike with the training wheels. And I had that issue a lot with well-meaning friends and relatives giving my kids stuff that I didn't want them to have. You know, well-meaning, they're like, "Yay, you know, fancy new bike," and the kids are happy. And I'm like, oh God, that was not my intention. I do not need more, you know, devices in the house, or, you know, whatever it was that did not go along with my parenting plan. And so this is kind of off topic from tension though, if this is an issue for other people, we might want to have it for a future topic. Rocky is over there nodding.
So Jennifer raised an interesting point here. She asked herself, what is she doing herself to hold her kids back? Has anybody seen themselves, caught themselves doing something that the kid was totally ready to do? And how did you recognize that? And then how have you worked to prevent it from happening?
So
I don't recognize it a lot. Like, just being perfectly candid about that. I do tension really, really well when my kids are under 8, with the teens that I mentor, with, like, as a consultant or at work. But this, like, middle range of, like, the concrete versus the abstract thinking, where the kids need less direct instruction, but they still need plenty of direct instruction. This is the place where, like, if I remember to do tension well, if I remember to get out of their way, I do that, like, so good. Like, I'm so good at that if I remember. And it's not very often. Well, I think I probably do remember often. I don't remember as often as I like until, like, 3 days later, when I'm like, oh, you know what I should have done? And then the moment has been so far past that my kids don't even care that I didn't let them make the decision, or whatever it is that I should have done. So I don't do it very great. But if someone else does, that'd be wonderful. I don't know how to get that into my thought patterns, I guess. That's, like, the question I raise here, is, like, how are you making that part of your regular thought patterns and your behaviors and your beliefs, so that way it becomes a core part of who you are, and you're no longer thinking, how do I create tension?
we, a while back, my daughter and I, she wanted a dog house for her stuffies, a little dog house. And I kind of, she helped me design it, and it was going to have a lid that would open and so forth. And we went out in the garage, and short of, you know, using the circular saw, which I do, she can use a drill and a hammer and nails and so forth. And I found myself becoming so attached to finishing that project that day that when she lost interest, I kind of kept pushing. And that tension of finish what you started versus what's the experience you want to get out of this, really, I struggled with that. And she took off to play with her friends or do something, and I kept working. And I realized in hindsight, the real tension, what would have really allowed the tension to build, would be to take everything she had done, neatly put it in a corner of the garage, and see if she came back to it. And I didn't allow that to happen, because probably I didn't feel like I wanted this thing in the corner of my garage, but I felt like it had to be done, and I took it over for her. And in hindsight, it was the worst thing I could do. I should have just said, "You're done, I'm done. Take a break."
Yeah, I had something similar with building a stool for my youngest a couple of years ago. It's like I got plans offline, and I'm pretty handy, so you know, I had them do some stuff, but then they got tired and they didn't want to do it. I'm like, hey, you got to stay here and help me. And I'm like, I just let them go, and I finished doing most of the work, but I did save, like, the end for them to screw some stuff in. But then my youngest, I think she didn't want to do this, put the screws in. I think she refused because I think she misunderstood that she thought it was going to be for her older sister and not her. So it's like, I just think, they're still a little young for the tools and stuff, but, definitely want to do that. And I put a link to a zoo. We were thinking about doing that, a zoo for the stuffed animals, which is, I think, easier to get in and out, but.
That reminds me of some stories that I've put on my podcast, my parenting podcast recently. I really think a lot about the questions, who's it for and what's it for? Seth has us think about those. And I apply those to things that I want to do with or for the kids. And so, right now I'm thinking, what direction Brett and Tom might have taken if they had asked themselves beforehand about the stool and the house for the stuffies. Is it for me for teaching my kids something because I don't know if I know how to teach my kid this, or is it for them to learn how to use animals, or is it for them to follow a project through to the end because they're really sucky at that, or is it for them experiencing, I don't know, some other part of the thing. I think if you know ahead of time who's it for and what it's really for, then it's easier to be congruent with your decisions as the thing progresses.
Yeah, sometimes in your day-to-day, it's hard to stop and say, what's it for?
So as I think about Jennifer's question, I think I'm actually pretty good at challenging my kids, and I'm trying to think about how that happens. And I'd like to think it's because I look at them and I see them as being better than they should be at their age. But honestly, as I've sat here and thought about this for the last 5 minutes, I think it's just because I'm too lazy and I haven't gotten around to doing the thing for them that they want me to do for them. So they just go ahead and do it themselves. And that has been a really good strategy, as it turns out, is just being a lazy parent. So sad.
I don't think that's sad at all. And I'm so glad that you brought it up. I had a similar experience where one of my very best homeschooling ideas, my daughter had to revise her work. And I just gave her my phone to read it out loud to herself and then listen to it back next to me. And that's because I didn't want to get out of bed. There was no other reason. So I made her do it, she had to do 4 total drafts, and she would go back and listen to them oh, that's what I need to change. And then she would go back and fix it. And it was just because I didn't feel like getting out of bed. And now she's sending it to me on Google Docs when I'm in bed. And it's a good reminder that it's really great to be lazy because it's for their own good.
Jennifer, we did something like that. Our kids have iPads. Sometimes that's controversial. Sometimes it's not. We limit their use. But I get emails from their teachers on Sunday night about the week ahead. And we used to kind of sit down and talk with them, and you could just see it, going right over. So I copy it into an Apple Note, which they have on their iPad, and I send it to them at their iCloud address. And they have really enjoyed that they can use their iPad for something other than games, because we're always telling them to turn off the games. And so they pop open the note and they look at it. There might be a link to a Quizlet. They have to learn some words or something. But I think allowing them to do grown-up things as they grow up has been really useful. It's really made them feel like, look, I'm like mom, and because I work from home, they see me. They know when I'm on a call. They know I'm on my computer. I think sometimes they're like, ooh, this is an adult thing. And now I'm interested in it. I'm just hoping I can keep that rolling. We'll see how it goes.
Amanda, we haven't heard much from you. Have you got anything that you can share with us about lazy parenting? I wouldn't equate you with lazy parenting.
Wow, actually what Tom and Brett said actually make me feel very emotional about, doing a project and push. And then this is actually my son a couple of years ago said, hey, you make things no fun. I was like, I am the fun parent. What are you talking about? I'm all about fun. How can I be not fun? But when he said that, well, he's actually sitting right outside. He's probably laughing now. And that made me think, like, because I want to finish something, maybe at that moment, it's not for him to finish everything. It's already enough right there. I should just, like what Tom and Brett said, I should just stop it and then come back with another happy, spirit, and then continue that project. And then, so that's very insightful. But I also feel like it's more the tension of my own tension with myself a lot of times. I think that's the tension, how I deal with that, the day-to-day tension I have with myself. And that's something I think it's a learning process. And, right at the moment, how do you do that? And another thing about being lazy, I have done it too. So this is my experience. A year ago, I told my kids, we're not going to have school lunch anymore because I don't think you guys like it, because you always talk about, oh, we had this and not good, and I want to have whatever we had at home. I said, okay, then we'll pack the lunch. But before, sometimes I help them pack the lunch. But now they're 14 and 16. So last year was maybe 2 years ago. Last year, 13 and 15. I say, well, you pack your lunch and then you have things to eat. I'm going to stop the school money account, and whatever you have it. When you're done, you're done. Then you see one child planning the meal, decide what to eat. And when I go grocery shopping, she'll write a note to me, say, okay, I would like to have this and that. Then the other person ran out the money, decided not to eat. It's really interesting. And then we noticed that he started to use his own pocket money to buy lunch. And then he found, wow, it's quite expensive. And then, he will come to talk to us, and then, or he will sometimes eat, sometimes not eat, and sometimes he will take things from home and then something easy to take home to the school. I think that's tension, and I think it's a learning experience, and I'm learning too. And two kids growing up in the same family with the same parents, they have very different decisions. So talking about tension is so hard.
Amanda, your mention of of your idea of complete versus what is enough. I see Karina down there smiling because I know Karina has a fantastic story about enough. And I was wondering, Karina, if you would be so kind to share it with everybody else here who might not have seen your story on LinkedIn.
Oh, I've come in late, so I don't know what everyone else has said. So, but yeah, so Catherine had posted her second episode about doing the baking with her grandkids, and how the kids were running around and not doing the baking with her. I don't know if you'll have listened to that episode. That podcast episode is really cool and cute, and it really, like, I think what I said on my LinkedIn thing was, it saved my Christmas, because I had 3 kids come back home. So I have a 19, 21, and 23-year-old. And so everyone came home for Christmas, and I just wanted Christmas to be perfect, right? It's like last year was busy. The year before we went home. So this was the rescue Christmas. This was like, come back to what Christmas should be. And they were very clear about what they wanted to do in terms of, they wanted to have these particular, traditional sweets and stuff like that. And so I set everything up, and I'm looking at my clock. It's 10 o'clock, nothing stirring. 11 o'clock, nothing's happening. Finally, like 2 o'clock, they show up in the kitchen, and I'm going crazy, right? Because we haven't put up the tree, we haven't put up anything, and it's like, and like, we're just kind of jamming all of Christmas into one weekend that used to, cluster up. Anyway, so fortunately for me, Catherine had posted something pretty much that week, I think, and I took the time to remember what she said, which is like, who is it for and what is it for? And I actually asked my daughter, who was there at the time, and she's the one who wanted a lot of the baking done. Is like, all right, I'm going nuts, and this is why I'm going nuts. So I'm going to ask you, what do you want? Like, who is it for and what is it for? And she goes, I just want to smell the baking, and I want to eat the food, and I want to sleep. And so we kind of settled on that, and I kind of set that as a tone for Christmas, and touch with everyone. I'm sure there's still some run-ins here and there, but for the most part, we had a quieter Christmas, but it seems like a much more adult Christmas than, the Christmas that we used to have when they were younger. But it seemed to be exactly what they were looking for, which is the message I got from them, from talking to them, which is thank you, Catherine. That's pretty much really what I got out of the episode, was have the conversation, to actually talk. And you realized how exhausted they were from the whole university, exam cycle and things like that. So what they wanted was home. They wanted their bed, literally their bed, and they wanted to sleep. And so they've now gone back happier. And she baked a lot, by the way. She then, once she had recovered, she did oh my God, she made macarons this year for the first time, and they were amazing. So yeah, she stepped up again later on, but that was what she needed at that moment. But so thank you, Catherine, a lot. And yeah, that LinkedIn post has really gone nuts. It's almost at 2,000 views and so many comments and stuff. And it's funny. It just keeps finding people.
Yeah, your kids have grown up when they want to sleep through Christmas.
Oh, I didn't start wrapping till 11 o'clock on Christmas morning. So I actually had to keep them in bed till 11:15, 11:30, 12.
Well, we are at 9:45, 9:46, and so it's time for us to wrap up and let everybody get back to their days. Here's what I'd like to suggest here. I put some things in the notes about tension drivers, and I posted a list that I got from the marketing seminar on tension drivers in the thread for this conversation. If people would like to explore this further, I would ask you to go and put some thoughts in that thread. And if there are thoughts in that thread, we can continue this discussion on our next time. And if there are no thoughts on that thread, then we'll know that this is kind of done. Other than that, we'll try and figure out what to do for next week. Now, I did want to ask for just a few more minutes of your time, because John and Catherine have an idea, and I think it's very interesting, that to actually write a book on parenting based on what it is we've talked about. And there are a couple of ideas that we could do if you're interested in doing this. So first of all, my question would be, if you're interested in this, and you don't have to respond right now, I will put a note and tag it at Akimbo Parents. But we could do, if you're interested in this, we could have a call maybe on Friday and talk about how to approach this, what's it for, who's it for. I like this because it gives a purpose larger than our conversations together to this conversation that we're having. We could do a table of contents, or we could do everybody contributes a short essay on what it is that they are Akimbo parenting as. And John, Catherine, do you have anything you would like to add? Have I summarized the conversation about this enough?
First thing I'll add is that I'm flying on Friday and I will not be at a conversation. So I would suggest, Quinn, that you start a new thread about this so that people can talk about it easily. There was already a ebook made by a bunch of members of Forward Link, and so we were thinking about something along that lines, but of course we could do something completely different. And so let's talk about it for a while and kind of come to a consensus about what we want to do. And let's reach out to other parents who aren't here today and maybe at them on the thread to get their opinion as well. We all know lots of great parents in Forward Link with great stories and great opinions. Okay,
we'll do that I'll ask around for a day that works for that, for anybody who wants to be involved in that. John, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I think you guys covered it pretty well. I'm starting a little list, as Quinn mentioned, just as the thoughts come, if you just jot them down, you don't have to post them if you don't want. I might just post mine, because I write all the time. So when a thought comes, before I forget it, I'll just write it down. And being that we're all different parenting styles, I think it'll be fascinating to look over the list and just talk about it and just bang some ideas off people and how we want to put things together. And I did suggest to Quinn and Catherine when we met on Saturday that I think Seth had a really good idea. You might recall that, well, it's one of my favorite books of all time. This one. Okay. And if you recall that when Seth wrote this, he said that he wrote it for people that don't really read, which is, we know that most people are either too busy to read or whatever. So this book is written, and it's fascinating how it's written. Here's just a sample page. Can you see that? And you can see how easy it is. And it's just very, very brief. It's not written like a large amount of chapters, but just very brief, maybe 200 words, 300 words, thoughts, maybe a quote here on this page, a thought on that page. So what I'm thinking is, you know, the simpler we can keep the book, perhaps, the more it'll vibrate or resonate with people. So it's just a thought.
Okay. Thank you, John. I will start a thread. I'll tag Akimbo Parents on this, and anybody who would like to join in that can get together and throw their thoughts into the mix there. Catherine?
Can I say one more thing that is not related to the book? I have been very, very negligent about my podcast. I put out 2 episodes back in November. I'm feeling like a bad podcaster, and I think I need more energy and more contact with people. And so I was thinking that I would send each of you a message through Forward Link and invite you to have a conversation with me on Zoom that I might be able to pull some nuggets out of for my podcast, because you guys have great ideas and I value your stories, and I need fresh energy to keep me going, and you guys are my tribe. So I'm going to write to you and talk about that more. And if the answer is no, you don't have time or don't want to, that's also completely okay. But I'm just warning you that it's coming.
Okay.
I've been sending people to your podcast, so I was waiting for you to put out more stuff. So you better hustle.
You're so awesome. Thank you.
Tension.
All right. Bye, guys.
Okay. Hey, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you.
Great week.
Thank
Have
you,
a great
Quinn.
week.
Thanks, Quinn.
You're very welcome.
Thank you all. See you next week.